Hello, I'm Hannah Wallace and welcome to Finextra TV. Kindly joining me now is Jim Wadsworth, Senior Vice President, Open Banking at Mastercard. Hello Jim, thank you very much for joining us. It's good to see you again.
Hi there, it's a pleasure.
So yes, we're talking about open banking, which is a huge topic at the moment. So to set the scene, why is it so relevant and why should our audience be taking such an interest?
As you say, it is a really big topic. In Europe, with PSD2 coming into full effect in 2019, it's clearly very important in our region, but actually it's a worldwide topic as well. From Mastercard's perspective, we see, we have conversations with customers worldwide about the topic, so it's a really important trend. In the end, what is open banking? It's really about giving customers, be they consumers or businesses, full control over the data that's in their bank accounts, and also the ability, if you like, to release that data to appropriately qualified third parties. And that's important because it enables and encourages innovation as well as competition, which is of course what the regulatory intent was. I think when we come to write the history of retail financial services in a few years' time, we'll see that open banking is probably as important a change as the advent of the iPhone in terms of what it means for bank services and how customers interact with their money.
Following on from that quite nicely then, how fast do you think it's going to be until open banking becomes mainstream?
Yeah, the UK is an interesting case study, the market I happen to personally live in. The UK's version of open banking went live at the beginning of 2018. And through 2018, what we saw happening was banks kind of really finishing off, optimizing their APIs, the technical route through which their accounts are accessed, and third parties starting to kind of understand it, getting registered by the UK's regulator, the FCA. As we got into 2019, as we speak, it's the end of May. If you compare just the activity in March 2019 with what happened in February, 30% month-over-month growth in terms of just usage of the bank's APIs. And we know from talking to the banks that overwhelmingly the usage, if you like, was being driven by fintechs of all sorts of flavors. Sure. So what we've seen is a year or so of just stabilization, and now suddenly we've seen really starting to take off. In terms of absolute numbers, kind of doesn't matter actually. What we're seeing is the growth. We expect in the long term that the size of the open banking market worldwide, just as measured by the number of transactions, could easily be a comparable scale to the entire cards industry today.
All right, but what about the challenges? I mean, with all trends, there's always going to be some challenges involved. So could you highlight some of the main hurdles in this space?
Yeah, there's a few things that perhaps aren't covered by regulation. Europe isn't the only market where open banking is happening, but it is taking the lead. The regulation is intended to encourage competition and innovation, as I say, by essentially getting the banks to open up access to customer accounts. But some of the things that happen as a result of that leave behind some potential gaps. So first and foremost, if I'm a third party, a fintech, an innovator trying to create a new service covering the customers of multiple banks, especially if I'm looking at it at a multinational level, I'm faced with the prospect of having to integrate to lots and lots and lots of different banks' APIs. Those APIs themselves, potentially are using a bunch of different standards. There's probably 6 different standards in Europe alone, and different banks implement to different standards in different ways. So that's quite a complex, rich mix. So that one of the things, therefore, that leaves behind is an opportunity for players potentially like Mastercard, and we are launching a service in this area, to essentially aggregate up all of those banks' APIs and to give the fintechs a single place to go to. So so it's both a problem, but it's also an opportunity. If I think about it from the lens of the bank, what happens when things go wrong? Even if it's a problem that's caused inadvertently by a third party, chances are quite high the customer is going to come to me, the bank, looking for me to put things right. Because in the end, the customer trusts me first and foremost. Well, that's kind of fine, and it's reflective of the quality of relationship banks have with their customers. But if a problem's been caused by somebody else, our bank would say, well, why should we be the ones bearing the brunt of putting it right? So that could be because of fraud, it could be because of mistake. So again, a couple of the things that we're doing, and other services I'm sure are available as well. But for example, giving the banks a tool to check in real time at the point of a transaction request. Is this third party that is looking to do this transaction with my customer, are they actually correctly regulated somewhere in Europe? Mm-hmm. Is that regulation current right now at this moment in time? And does this third party have a track record of positive transactions, positive interactions with the customers, or actually is it doing something out of the ordinary? Are there problems that other banks have seen? Mm-hmm. That helps the bank whose customer is asking for that transaction to understand, better the risk associated with the interaction. The other thing we're doing, and this is in consultation with the industry, so both banks and third parties alike, we are currently consulting on a new set of rules for how disputes between banks and third parties get resolved. Mm-hmm. In the interests of, ultimately the end user of these services, be they business or consumer, to make sure that if problems do occur, let's hope they don't, but if they do, they're resolved quickly and efficiently in everybody's interests.
So you've touched on this a little bit already, and that's sort of what Mastercard's doing now, but what is the role of traditional players around open banking going forward?
What we're already seeing is many institutions going beyond their regulatory mandate, their regulatory instruction, themselves to capitalise on this new economy. So again, if we take the UK as a proxy, most of the major banks in the UK have now created account aggregation services. So if I'm at Bank X, but I also have accounts at Bank Y, then I can access my accounts at the other bank through my primary bank's mobile banking interface, for example. So we're seeing people already capitalising on it. In the same way, we're seeing some really interesting innovation coming forwards, whether from banks themselves or from fintechs. All sorts of lending propositions to make it easier for people and businesses alike to apply for loans, instead of having to provide a whole bunch of bank statements and history or whatever. Instead, give that lender the authority to reach into my accounts. They can get the data they need to make a very quick and probably more accurate from their perspective lending decision.
Well, you've certainly ended on a positive note there, and definitely some things to look forward to. Thank you so much, Jim. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching.